brothers and sisters and friends, you never knew that you could commit jihad on poverty. Why do we live in a world where there are 2 billion people on less than $2 a day? Why do we live in a world where there's more than 1 billion people with no sanitation? Why do we live in a world where millions of children every couple of years are dying because of no food? Why? This has nothing to do with a lack of resources. Go to the UN, go to the Food Agriculture Organization, and you will see that there is enough calories on this planet to feed 3 planets. So the problem is not a lack of resources, the problem is a lack of distribution. Do not listen to the evil capitalists who say that there are too many needs and not enough resources. This is a geopolitical myth. It's a geopolitical lie. What I'm advocating today is a jihad on poverty, because the only solution is the Islamic solution. And I want you to listen to me. What do I mean by jihad on poverty? The Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, he had an accurate geopolitical model. He said there are enough resources and enough needs. The Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, said that the son of Adam, the human being, all he needs is food, shelter and clothing, which creates the essential macroeconomy of distribution, not one of excessive competition. So, brothers and sisters and friends, I want you to listen carefully. If you are people of conscience, people of heart, if you are people of humanity, you would realize that the only solution is the Islamic solution, because capitalism has failed, communism has failed. Islam talks about how to deal with the #1 economic problem, which is the distribution of wealth. And we started with talking about the correct geopolitical model, which are the essential limited needs are defined, and there's enough calories and resources for everybody. Another point number two, Islam prohibits interest, because interest is the impediment to the distribution of wealth. Why? Well, imagine I bought a house and I had to pay more in interest. If you take that interest away, there is more money in my pockets. But you may be thinking, but maybe I'm going to be greedy and keep that money to myself. But that's not true, because in Islam, there's no positive interest. So that is a economic stimulus for you to take that excess wealth and inject it back into society, to pay for roads and businesses and entrepreneurship. Also, in Islamic economy, the Islamic economics is very low taxation, around 2.5%. In America, you pay 40% direct tax. Forget about indirect tax. In Islam, the tax is really low, so there's more excess wealth in the hands of people to inject it back into society. We have more points. In capitalism, for instance, in neoliberal economics, what happens? Our money, let me show you something. Our money, this doesn't mean anything. It's an IOU. It's someone owes you some wealth. This doesn't mean nothing. Take it.
Thank you. Give it.
With this £10 note, it's only valuable because you believe it's valuable.
Can I have it then?
But it's not even good enough to wipe your private parts. Honestly, listen to me. In neoliberal economics, money is free floating. It's not pegged on the gold or silver, or it's not pegged on wealth. This is why on the news you will hear the term quantitative easing. What does quantitative easing really mean? It means printing more money, and it's not contingent on wealth. But in Islam, economy is far more stable, because money is contingent on the gold or silver standard. It's contingent on the gold or silver standard. So that means when there is more money in society, it means I'm going to answer that. I'm going to answer that. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to answer that. So, when there's more money in society, businesses are not undervalued. It means there's more wealth. And let me tell you something, brothers and sisters and friends.
Listen, please.
Our economic values in Islam is unprecedented. One of the caliphs of Islam, his name was Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Do you know what he said to the people? He said, "Oh people, go to the tops of the mountains and put wheat on the top of the mountains." So the other people say that we didn't keep the birds hungry. This was the God consciousness of these people. Every human being had food, shelter and clothing. They were worried about feeding the birds. Also, if you go to Philip Mansel's book, he's a historian, it's called Constantinople. He cites a primary source. It's a letter to a rabbi. And the rabbi in 1453, he writes a letter to his Jewish brethren. And he says, "Oh my Jewish brethren, come to the land of the Turks, the land of the Muslims. Rich are the fruits of the earth, and we're not oppressed with heavy taxes." So brothers and sisters, if you want to revive this gloomy situation in the 21st century, we have billions with no food, millions dying of starvation. According to the UNDP report, in the late 1990s, millions of children were dying because of no food. Why is it that in Somalia you have 10 million starving? In America you have 10 million because they're too fat, they're too obese, because it's a distribution of wealth. And I have given you the solution. And if this is a good solution, then investigate its source, which is the Islamic model. May God bless everybody. Questions, please.
Why don't you come on, ask him. Ask him now.
It was named me as a peaceful Islamic country.
Okay, good. There was two questions from the gentleman, our beloved human being. The first question was, why don't you have this solution today? Well, this is so true. All the Muslim countries are full of dictators, despots, and people who do not represent our core values. The second question was there a peaceful nation? Yes, it was so peaceful. Do you know what the Jews said? Zion Zohar, he is a Jewish academic. He wrote the book Sephardic Jewry, and he said, thus, when the Muslims crossed the Straits of Gibraltar in the Iberian Peninsula, the Jews saw the Muslims as liberators from Christian persecution. Takbir! Takbir! Takbir!
Follow like sheep, all of you!
Takbir! Any other questions? Any other questions?
I had a question.
Where's one? Yeah, I have a question. Where's the t-shirt blue? There's the cello.
From here, next one, please.
Next question, please.
Anyone got question? Anyone? I know you are a passport
So any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? If not, have a good day.
Why do you believe in the Qur'an when it contains scientific errors?
Okay, the gentleman said, why do you believe in the Qur'an if it contains scientific errors? I would like to ask the gentleman,
What is the
I will ask you a question. Is this scientific fact 100% true?
No, actually you're right.
Thank you. He answered to himself.
I'll give you one of the errors. I know where the bits of my body are, right? I know where semen comes from. But the Quran says it comes from between the backbone and the ribs. I think it's Surah 84. I'll look the verse up if you want.
Okay.
And that's not true.
Okay.
My bits of my body aren't between the backbone and the ribs.
Let me answer that question. There's two ways to answer that question. Answer number one. If science by its own methodology relies on the inductive method, what is the inductive method, people? Let's educate each other. Inductive method is you take a limited set of observations and you conclude for the next observation, which is called weak induction, or the entire set of observations, which is called strong induction. David Hume, the Scottish skeptic, he wrote, and he said that induction does not lead to certainty. And this is very simple, because you're never going to have an infinite number of observations. So the point is, when you use the science stick to bash religion, it's actually epistemologically false. What do I mean by that? It means your route to knowledge is not based on certainty. So you're using something that's not certain to bash something which we claim to be from the divine. However, let me even answer the question another way. I want you to give me the Arabic words, and then I'll give you an answer.
I can't speak Arabic.
Okay, good. So therefore you're relying on testimony, which is someone's interpretation.
No, I've read many English translations and they all say the same thing. Therefore I can be pretty certain they're accurate translations.
So, okay, one second. Well, that means it's also relying on testimony. He is arguing that testimony is a valid source of information, which is good.
Surah 86, 5 to 7.
Let me give you the answer. Let me give you the answer. The Quranic discourse is what you would call a multi-layered text. Go to the classical dictionaries. There are some available online. Go to Lane's Lexicon or Lisan ul Arab. Take one word, that word may mean 5 things. Now it's up to the person doing the translation to pick which term to use, especially...
Let me finish. It's irrelevant for this.
But I have an English translation that gives an accurate answer. If you go to Muhammad Asad's translation, he says something different. It's the pelvic area of the woman. And
tell us then, what's the difference?
Definitely wasn't made
So when it says here, he was created from fluid ejected emerging from between the backbone and the ribs.
Yes.
Tell us which word it is that's translated differently.
The backbone and the ribs.
And ribs.
Yes.
So what are the alternative translations?
The Arabic was a surban tara'ib. Basically they could mean various things. It could indicate the pelvic arch of the woman. It could also indicate the area of the groin for the man. And in the context of the Arabic language, it could mean when the man and woman come together.
Created from
when the
fluid
man and woman,
ejected.
yes.
The fluid ejected
that's the
is a woman's pelvis.
No.
That's what you've just said.
No.
You said it could be a woman's pelvis.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a deaf man on my left. May God.
It could be a woman's pelvis.
No, I didn't say that.
Another question there.
Anyway, carry on.
You talked about science as being inaccurate because I can't remember the answer. Yeah, but you talked about something not being sure.
It's not certain.
Not certain, right? Therefore, why are so many Muslims claim the Qur'an is from God because of the scientific miracles within it? Are they wrong to do that?
Yes.
That's a fair, good answer. But you tell them that. You tell them that.
I just published a paper just about an hour ago. Basically, the best approach is, in my humble view, this approach. The words of the Quran are multi-layered. And let me tell you something interesting about the Quranic discourse. Take the word alaqa. Alaqa in the classical dictionaries, it could mean something that clings. It could mean a leech or a worm or a blood clot. Interestingly, this was in agreement with the 7th century science. Galen thought it was a blood clot. The Greeks thought it was something that clings. The Hebrews believed it was something that clings. But if you continue after the 15th century, when we got a microscope, we now know the word alaqa can also mean leech. And if you look by using the microscope after day 22 to 25 in the stages of human embryology, you see the embryo looking like a leech. Interestingly, if you dissect a medicinal leech, it looks like an embryo. So it shows the Quran is multi-layered and addresses different times and places for different people. Takbir! Allahu Akbar! Takbir! Allahu Akbar! Takbir!
Another question then. Right, so if you don't believe in the Quran because of scientific miracles, and I'm really glad to hear that, the Muslims say that, why do you believe in the Quran?
Okay, the Quran is a miracle for so many different reasons. Number 1, a linguistic miracle. Number 2, it was preserved at a time where there was so much political strife that it was more likely not to be preserved, but we could prove it's preserved. Number 3, let me finish. Number 3, sir, take care of yourself. Number 3, historical miracles and historical statements at the time of revelation that were unknown that are in the Quran itself. So let me give you the three. Let me give you evidence for all three. I'm not going to go too long, I'm going to give you some evidence. Evidence number one, the linguistic miracle. The Quran is made of the Arabic language. It has around 28 letters and finite grammatical rules and words. But when you exhaust the combination of these words and letters, you cannot produce the literary form of the Quran, which is the structural features of the language. This is unlike Shakespeare, because Shakespeare used the iambic pentameter, the blank verse, trochaic verse that were used by many other English literateurs. We're talking about a new literary form in the Arabic language, and we cannot emulate it or imitate it. This is why, Professor, wait, let me finish. This is why Professor Bruce Lawrence from Duke University, he says, Quranic verses as tangible signs are expressive of inexhaustible truth. They signify meaning, laid within meaning, light upon light, miracle after miracle. Evidence number two.
Why isn't the Quran consistent in the Quran?
Evidence number two.
Why isn't the
that the Quran is a preserved document.
Answer the question. Why isn't the Quran consistent?
Let me finish, then I'll answer your question, sir.
No, that's to do with that first.
We have an impatient individual. May God make it easy for him. Now, ladies and gentlemen,
First point.
evidence
Why
number
isn't the
two.
rhyme in the Quran consistent?
Evidence number two. Evidence number two. The Quran is preserved. If you go to the website Islamic-awareness.org, you would see the whole of the Quran 1st century after Hijrah in facsimile form. It's been preserved. The second point is that we have an oral tradition. We have an oral tradition that is preserved. If you go to North African countries, some African children have never memorized the Quran from reading, only by listening, and their chains of narration and authority lead them to different scholarship all the way to the Prophet Muhammad upon him be peace, which indicates that what they say is the Quran is actually true because of this recurrent reporting. Evidence number three. Evidence number three.
There's 2,270.
Explain
that.
Evidence number three.
Your website.
Evidence number three. Historical miracles. Historical miracles. The Quran in various places mentions two titles for the leader of the Egyptians. Title number one, Pharaoh. Title number two, Al-Malik. So there's a difference between two titles. The king, Al-Malik, and Pharaoh, which is Pharaoh in Arabic. And these two titles are for two different times. Pharaoh at the time of Moses, Malik, king, at the time of Joseph. Why two different periods? The Bible got it wrong. It just says Pharaoh. The Torah got it wrong. It just says Pharaoh. And hieroglyphs, which was the pictorial language of the Egyptians, was a dead language. So why is the Quran right? And we know it's right because Yusuf, at the time of Joseph, it was the old Middle Kingdom. At the time of Moses, it was the new Middle Kingdom. And in the new Middle Kingdom, they mentioned Pharaoh. In the old Middle Kingdom, king. And we know now today, as a result of translating the hieroglyphics, that the Quran was actually right, and it went against the knowledge of the 7th century.
So you're saying,
and the reason we know that
it wasn't called Pharaoh.
the divine.
Moses' time. Is that what you're saying?
It was.
It wasn't called Pharaoh.
No, it wasn't called at Yusuf's time. It was called king.
Oh, in Joseph's time, it wasn't called Pharaoh.
Yes.
Okay. So if we could show evidence that he was called Pharaoh in Joseph's time,
I will give you £30.
Okay. Now listen, the Quran says in Surah 12:20 that Joseph was
I will
sold
give him
for
£30.
dirhams counted out. In Surah 12:20, Surah 12:20, it says that Joseph was sold for a few dirhams counted out. When were dirhams introduced?
Period.
Okay, they were introduced in 642, 10 years after Muhammad's death.
Yes.
The Bible says he was sold for 20 shekels of silver.
Yes.
Shekels and a weight of silver, confirmed by the Nazi tablets of the time as the correct price for the for the slave. So what the Bible says is wrong. The evidence from what the Qur'an says is that it has to be written at least 10 years after Muhammad's death.
The reason this man's wrong for two reasons. The Quran says for a petty price, for a few dirhams. Doesn't give an exact price. The second point is, what are dirhams made of? What are they made of? What's a dinar and a dirham made of? It's gold and silver. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.